always remind Esther.
All
All
right.
right. Let's let Ava is in. Ava's here. 1 second.
Hi, Shirley.
Okay.
Hi.
Welcome, Ava. We're glad you're here. She made it and she turned off her camera. All right, Ava, you looked good on camera. You should have it on once in a while. All right. Um, last week, not last week, several weeks ago, we spoke about mixtures. And we were talking about mixtures in Kashrut. Now, we know that certain mixtures, according to the Torah, are completely forbidden. And someone mentioned last week, they said, there's a Reform rabbi that said, well, the Torah says you can't mix meat and milk together, but it doesn't say you can't eat it. Well, anyway, it's interesting when you think of all of the rabbinic laws, and that's why, there are Torah laws and there are rabbinic laws. And Torah laws, if we went by the Torah, we would be able to eat chicken, for instance, as of course it's one of the fowl, as being considered parv, the same thing as fish was regarded. And I often cry my woes about that one because I say, why did they have to decide in the Gemara of all the things that they had to pick on, they had to pick on that? Because I still think it's a shanda nacharpa that we can't have chicken parmigiana on a Friday night. So what happens if you break a rabbinic law? Is there a blackboard up in heaven? Is God going, oh, there's a check mark on that side? And well, there is a belief that on Hine Yom Hadin, on Yom Kippur every year, where we ask mi yichyem, mi yamut, and I should have another year, a prosperous year, and be healthy. What do we actually think? When we think of a prosperous year, if I ask anybody over 20, they'll say a prosperous, or even 30 or 40, they'll say a prosperous year means good health. That's a prosperous year. And the older we get, the more we realize that. When you're 18, what's a prosperous year? I made as much money as Elon Musk. That's a prosperous year. So I think that what is the difference in the halachas, in the laws that are rabbinic or Torah? And really, if you break a Torah law, like mamish, a real bad, one of the Aseret HaDibrot, one of the 10 Commandments, it says that some of them are karet. Karet means to cut off. You're cut off. Cut off from what? What am I cut off from? No one's going to stop me on the street and say, you can't drive a car to Sobeys because you broke a law. Nobody's going to say, I'm not taking your money in the store. You're cut off from the next world, from the Olam Haba. That's a very harsh punishment. That is the kind of punishment and the kind of thinking that really made Christianity blossom. Long time ago when we know that, if you wonder why I'm talking about this, Jesus was, if I read a whole thesis on this. He actually was a pretty frum Jew. And he had a brother, James. Most people don't know that. James was regarded as his brother. And there was Saul. Saul became the Apostle Paul. And Paul's job was to go out and sell Christianity to the Romans, to the Roman emperor. And James's job was to sell Christianity to the inside walls of Jerusalem. And James never advocated that Jewish people who are going to accept those new ways should give up on keeping mitzvot HaTorah. He never said all of a sudden, you don't need to be circumcised. He didn't say you don't need to keep kosher. No, they never said these things. Where did all that come from? Well, Apostle Paul, who was originally Saul, went out. It's like the joke about the guy, Mickey Katz's son, Joel Gray. What kind of a name is Joel Katz? So he changed his name to Gray. So I guess Paul sounded better than Saul. Saul sounded too Jewish. So he went out and he was selling Christianity to Constantine, the emperor, the Roman emperor, by telling him, you don't need to keep kosher, you never were Jewish, so all you have to do is give up the idol worship. You don't have to worry about um, circumcision. You don't have to keep any of the mitzvot. You just have to believe. And what do I get if I believe that? What am I getting? So you'll get eternal life. Wow. Now, if somebody could really promise you eternal life, I think we would all do just about anything for that. Think about it, to live forever. Because, we think of this world as living. I don't know, is it living? Standing in line for vaccines? I don't know, maybe the next world you don't have to stand in line for a vaccine or a rapid test. Who knows? Maybe in the next world you can have chicken and cheese, because we're going to find out that the Gemara got it all wrong in Chulin, and we should be able to have it. Who knows? The point is that karet is very serious. Being cut off from the next world for not willing and not keeping a Torah commandment. And then we go, well, some of them aren't as important, so he accidentally flipped on the light, so he drove, so he, like different things that mitzvot that we might not keep are not even worthy of lashes, they say. And we'll get to that later on, we'll talk, because there was a time where you could get you get lashes if you committed a sin. If you did a sin publicly, that was different than privately. You did a public sin, you could actually get lashes in those days. All right, today, our rabbis aren't chasing us down the street and giving us lashes. But we do have a fear. We call it, yirat shamayim, that we should have a fear of the heavens, of God, thinking about if we perform the mitzvot and we're getting those brownie points on the blackboard, as we call them, that we're going to earn our chelik la'olam haba, our portion in the world to come. Now, the Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, lets us off very lightly by saying, really, if you perform one mitzvah in your lifetime, it's not so hard to achieve that you'll have a chelik, a portion in the world to come. It doesn't suggest that you should only do one mitzvah and then give up on mitzvahs. You should keep on. But it gives us leniencies. And we find that the Gemara, the commentary on the Talmud, on the Mishnah, the Mishnah, whenever you hear the term a rabbi or somebody's teaching you and they say, the Mishnah says, the Mishnah is the center portion by Yehuda Hanasi. It's the first transcribing of the laws, interpreting the laws, the oral laws. And then after that, you have the Gemara, which is around it. Those are all the commentaries. That was written a few hundred years later, maybe 500 years later. The Gemara came much later. You have the Mishnah in the middle, and the Gemara came later. So when you hear the Gemara, someone says, well, the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, it's all relating to the Talmud. So when I could really skip that lingo and just say the Talmud says. If I say the Talmud, then it encompasses the Mishnah and the Gemara and all the commentaries, including all of the new and obscure thoughts. If you get a Vilna Talmud, like the old-fashioned great big books that are this big, and you go to the back pages, you'll see things and opinions that are not even necessarily in some of the modern Gemaras today. But mixtures, which we talked about, have an even more stringency, because why are we here today? Because I said we're going to talk a little bit about Pesach. Pesach, we haven't even had Purim yet. We're not even doing with the Grugger, and Marshall's already talking about Pesach. Well, it's never too early. I always say, the day after Pesach ends, you can start your cleaning already for next year. So Pesach is a very strict holiday. So what does it say regarding Pesach? Well, in the Talmud, there's a section called Pesachim. And in Pesachim, it says that Hameets on Pesach, whether it was mixed in something similar or something different. What does that mean, something similar or something different? I'll give you an example. If I take olive oil, and I mix it in with regular canola oil, I'm mixing oil with oil. If I take motor oil and I mix it with olive oil, well, they're oils. It's a pretty far-stretched thing, but I can say they're oil. You're not going to eat it on your toast or your cholent, but it's oil. But if I took, let's say, peanut butter, and I mixed peanut butter with wine, well, they have nothing to do with each other. They're two completely different things. They're not even similar. They're two different things. Well, there were expressions that we talked about earlier on several weeks ago, and I said something can be min she'eno b'mino, or it could be min b'mino. So we know the word ein means I don't have. If I say ein li mastik, means I don't have any chewing gum. Okay? So ein li, ein. So something that is she'eno b'mino means things that are not the same as each other being mixed together. Amin b'mino are two similar things being mixed together. So in Pesachim, it's teaching us that whether something is similar or something's different, it doesn't matter. It's forbidden, it's asur, even the tiniest amount. Now, what am I saying even the tiniest amount for? Because for people like Shirley, who wasn't here before and didn't hear this part of the talk, we talked about how there are accidents that can happen. Unintentional accidents, meaning you accidentally walk by with your glass of milk and you accidentally a drop of milk goes into your giant pot of chicken soup. You don't have to throw the chicken soup out because there's a Jewish law given to us by our rabbinic sources that says that if it's batul vashishim, if it's less than 1/60th of the amount of the chicken soup is less than 1/60, then it's okay. It's not, it nullifies. It makes it null and void. The milk is nullified. And we talked about b'diavad, intentional thoughts, or unintentional accidents. You know, an intentional is a lechatchila, means from the beginning, from the start. You know, this is a very drastic interpretation. But think about think about our laws. If somebody's, God forbid, chas v'shalom, drives a car and they're not paying attention, they're looking at their cell phone. You shouldn't look at your cell phone when you're driving, and you hit somebody, and you kill somebody, you could be up for a manslaughter charge because you weren't doing, you might get off, you might not. Maybe you went through a red light and you broke a law by going through the red light. Did you intend to kill a person? God forbid, no. That's a lot different than a first-degree murder, something that you intend to do. I'm going to take my car, I'm planning it, this person walks across the street at 3 o'clock every day, and I'm going to wait there, and I'm going to kill that person with my car. I'm planning it, that's a first-degree murder. Something that happens on the spur of the moment could be a second degree. It's almost like the difference of a first-degree offense from Torah, a second-degree offense, rabbinic ruling. You don't get lashes for it. You're not cut off from the next world. So you made a mistake, so you carry on. And something that was unintentional. The rabbis give you a lot of leniencies for unintentional acts. And why do I tell you this? Some of my friends would say to me, you're giving them too much information. Don't tell them that, because then they're going to say no, but I want you to know. You shouldn't walk around your whole life. Yes, you should walk around with Yiras Shamayim, but you don't have to walk around your whole life thinking, I did this, I did that, I'm going to be cut off, I'm going to be wrong. You'll be depressed your whole life. You'll walk around depressed. I didn't follow all the mitzvahs. Everybody in this room is a wonderful person. You don't have anything to worry about. I'm telling God. So, but the point is that the difference between Pesach and the rest of the year is if you drop a tiny, tiny bit, even unintentionally. I didn't mean to drop the piece of bread, that little piece of bread, into my Pesach lakshan or whatever it is that you're making. But you did. It's finished. It's forbidden. There's no batul vashishim. The 1/60th rule does not apply. Even if it's only notain tam, even if it's giving a taste, you're not supposed to. So, Why am I teaching you what Pesachim says? Because what rabbis ever agree with each other? There's always this one argued with that one, and this one doesn't believe what this one says, and then you got to learn all the opinions. So Rashi, everybody knows about Rashi. Rashi comes forward and he says, even though that Rav has the opinion of all the other prohibitions, like for instance, pork or other foods not being allowed, his opinion that if the prohibited food got mixed up with a different type, then the halacha is only forbidden if it was no taint tongue, 60 times, 1/60th. And he says, even though he says about the other prohibitions, he said the Rav extended the prohibition to even a mixture of Hameets. Ooh, now there's something interesting. Rashi is saying even Hameets that 1/60th should apply to. And he says, don't get excited yet. I'm not saying that this is what you follow. I didn't tell you this is the rules. I'm just telling you what Rashi says, okay? So he says, even though he says that there was a prohibition, he said, since eating Hameets on Pesach, you are punished by being cut off from heaven, karet, cut off. In the case of other prohibitions, such as, we learned from the Gemara, from the Talmud, that there's certain fats that we were not supposed to eat. We don't eat blood. We always think about our meat as, there's always that question, can I leave my meat rare? How rare can you leave it? Can blood be oozing out of it? Can you eat it so it's raw? Not really. You're supposed to cook it at least well enough done so that it's cooked through. What does cooked through mean? Well, we'll get into that another time. That 1/3 would be a good starting point. Cooked enough so that if the robber stole the meat and had to cook it by a campfire, that it was cooked barely enough so that if he was on the run and had to run, it was just barely enough cooked. So, Hameets, Rashi is suggesting, maybe has a little bit of a leniency of 1/60th. He said people don't have to separate themselves from it because we're used to eating it all year round. So why do we have to hide from Hameets? So don't eat it. Why do we have to be so strict about cleaning everything and moving out this and moving that and looking all over and, being so careful so you don't eat it? But he said, it's normal to have Hameets because we eat it all year round. And he said, but that's why there's an extra decree of stringency. All right. Rambam, Maimonides, comes forward and he says, well, the prohibition of eating Hameets on Pesach, even though it's one of the Torah prohibitions, it's not one of these categories because of mixtures of tarovot. Remember we said the word tarovot before? We talked about mixtures, similar mixtures, non-similar mixtures. He said, but a mixture of Hameets is forbidden forever. Ooh. So that means he's saying, if you even mix the tiniest amount of Hameets into the food, it's completely forbidden on Pesach. Even a tiny bit. Batul doesn't apply at all, he says. Okay? Whether it's similar or whether it's dissimilar. Min b'mino, min she'eno b'mino, doesn't matter. Now the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, Hameets, now what do we always look towards at the bottom of the line? We get all of these sources and all of these learning and from the Talmud, from the Gemara, from the Mishnah. We take a look at it. At the end of the day, we turn to the Shulchan Aruch. Now there's a distinction. If you go to a bookstore and you say, I want a set of Shulchan Aruch, and you pick up the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, that's not the Shulchan Aruch. So that's a more strict set of books by Rabbi Gansfried. I think he was Hungarian. Very, very right-wing, strict book. I'm not saying that it's not good. I'm just saying that that would be a very strict opinion on the Shulchan Aruch. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is a completely different set. So a lot of people will buy a set of Kitzur, put it on their shelves, and they believe that that is the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is completely different. Shulchan Aruch, we said last week, is written by Rav Yosef Karo, and he's known as the Mechaber. Well, there are many sources that we go to when it comes to laws. Shulchan Aruch being one of them. So if I take a look at my notes here, I think I have something that I was going to share with you on the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, Yosef Karo, was between 1488 and 1575, and he was the author of that codification that we call the Shulchan Aruch. He was born in Toledo in 1488, and in 1492, at the age of 4 years old, he was expelled from Spain with his family as a result of the Alhambra decree, subsequently settled in the Kingdom of Portugal. And after the expulsion of the Jews from Portugal, the Ottoman Empire, so the Ottomans invited the Jews to settle within their empire. And Yosef Karo went with his parents after a brief move to Morocco, and then a city under the Ottoman rule. So it gives you an idea of what time period we're talking about. So, Yosef Karo writes this book called the Shulchan Aruch, but he was a Sephardic rabbi for the Sephardic Jews, highly regarded by everybody, including Ashkenazi Jews. But we had our own Rebbe. We had Moshe Isserles. And Moshe Isserles wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Well, he didn't write a commentary. He actually wrote his Ashkenazic opinions, which follow and are inserted in the Shulchan Aruch. So when you look there, you'll see his opinions, which many of them we follow. The Shulchan Aruch, which is Yosef Karo, says, I'm doing this because if you don't have a little bit of an idea of who these people are, I could just throw out names. You can say that, it's like walking into a group of people. Sometimes you know, sometimes you don't. You say the word Ramban, and they might think you're talking about Maimonides, but you're talking about Nachmanides. I mean, there's a Ramban, there's a Rambam, there's a Karo, there's an Isserles, and there's a Shach and a Taz. And so you get to know a little bit the basics of who these people are. And the Shulchan Aruch writes, he says, Hameets, period, that was mixed with anything else, anything at all, he said, this is the part that is, I find, the interesting part that we have to be aware of. This makes sense. 6 hours after sunrise on Erev Pesach, it becomes prohibited. So that's the midday point. So in the morning on Erev Pesach we do a burning. You've sold it the night before. You've done the search. And the next morning you get up and they tell you the last time to eat Hameets is, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning, and you've already gotten rid of it by then because you don't even want it in the house. You don't even want to think about it. But maybe you've saved a muffin on a paper towel. So at 10 to 10 you go out in the porch and you eat your muffin. And you throw maybe. So the point is that already he's giving us a time period. He's saying 6 hours after sunrise on Erev Pesach is the time that Hameets becomes forbidden. Now, he says you can't own it, which we know. You have to sell it. And you can't use it. And you can't derive benefit from it. Well, that's interesting. Does that remind us of something? It reminds us of things that are basar b'chalav, meat and dairy, that we're not supposed to derive benefit from it. I always talk about the cheeseburger. You go and you buy the cheeseburger for your helper at home because they're not Jewish, and you're thinking I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm doing a good thing. They like a cheeseburger. I'll go to McDonald's and pick up the cheeseburger, and you give it to them. But you're deriving benefit from that. You can't even give the cheeseburger to your dog if you like your dog, because you're deriving benefit. You get happiness from the dog, so you can't give the cheeseburger to the dog. There's no benefit from Hameets if it's after 6 hours. But what if you cooked that Hameets 9 hours before, 7 hours before, 6 hours and 11 minutes before? Then you can derive benefit from it. You could give it to your neighbor who you like and say, I have this Hameets, I cooked it 6 hours and 11 minutes ago. I'm rushing over to give it to you because I can't have it. he's giving us a time frame for which we have to have a bit of a stringency. See, when I go like this, I look like Donald Trump. Anybody see that cartoon with the accordion when he's holding the thing and he's talking and he looks like a schmo? He's going back and forth with the accordion. I don't want to do that. All right. Anyway, so that's the Shulchan Aruch. Now, we're going to turn to what the Mishnah Brura says. So I've spoken about Mishnah Brura many, many times. And why am I telling you this? Because when we start our new topic in January, I'm hoping in Yirtzeh Hashem, on technology and halacha, I'll give you these sources and I'll remind you who they are, but you should have an idea, an inkling of who these people were. People always say, the Mishnah Brura says, the Mishnah Brura says. You know, Mishnah Brura was a man who known as Yisrael Meir Kagan. And Yisrael Meir Kagan clarified halacha, teaching. And he is giving he's also known as the Chafetz Chaim. Has anybody heard of the Chafetz Chaim? I think so. So, you know, the first section of the Shulchan Aruch, which deals with the laws of tefillah and prayer and shul and Shabbat and all the Yom Tovim, it summarizes the opinions of the post-medieval rabbinic authorities. So it's if I have a set of Mishnah Brura, I'll bring next time. I'll show you some of the volumes. But what it does is it's divided up into 6 volumes. Occasionally now some of the new editions are putting 2 volumes into one book, so it's like 3 books. But usually it's 6 books. And in the 6 books, they're divided up according to different aspects of halacha. So Yisrael Meir Kagan, known as the Mishnah Brura, says, even though, by the way, when you read the Mishnah Brura, you're going to have a lot of different opinions in there. It's not just his opinion. Then there's all these other rebbes that give opinions. Well, in my place in Poland, we did it this way. In my place in Hungary, we did it that way. And then the Rabbanim would get together and they would have votes on how they're going to follow and what they're going to do in times of Sanhedrin. You know, they had to make decisions. And so they make suggestions. They want to give you all of the opinions. I'll give you an example. In one of the laws for customs for Rosh Hashanah is that on Rosh Hashanah, we do tashlich, right? When do we do tashlich? On the first day or the second day? What?
On the first day, unless it's Shabbos.
You steal all my... You know too much.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ruth, you're not supposed to know everything. Ruth, very good. So Ruth says, you do it on the first day, unless it's Shabbos. Okay, very good. So that's exactly true. So there's one obscure opinion in the Mishnah Brura, for example, that says, in our area of Europe, we did it even if the first day was Shabbos, because you're supposed to rush to do the mitzvah. But in little print underneath it says, but this is not usually followed. Okay, well they're telling you that somebody did it that way, but it's not followed. It's like, can you imagine being the one obscure person on your street that lights Hanukkah candles 8 on the first day and 7 on the second day and 6? I mean, you're following Shammai, right? It could happen. I'm laughing. By the way, you should never mock other opinions. So I'm not laughing at Beit Shammai. What I'm saying is that, it says that in the after the time of the Mashiach, we're going to follow all of the rules of Shammai. We'll follow his rules. In other words, that he should get credit. In other words, that his time will come that we'll follow his rulings. So in the meantime, nobody wants to be the one person who's different than everybody else. So if I took my congregation out and said, we're doing Tashlich on the first day, even though it's Shabbos, it shouldn't be done that way, because you're not following the opinion of the majority of the community of which you live in. And we talked about that we're supposed to go along with the community. And Mishnah Brura says, even though you would get lashes. You would get lashes for violating the prohibition, especially if you did it in front of witnesses. You break the law of you're eating a slice of pizza on Pesach at Bathurst and Shepherd, where everybody can walk by and see you. That would be a violation that would deserve lashes. It's not in the category of tarovot, of mixtures. It's a mixture of Hameets and that's it. A mixture of something that you shouldn't be eating on Pesach. Well, I guess if you had a pepperoni pizza, then it'd be a mixture of two different. That'd be even worse. The only thing I can throw in there is is do it on Yom Kippur would be even worse. So he's saying that you can't derive benefit from it, and you can't use it, you can't own it, but nevertheless, the Mishnah Berurah says, there is no prohibition of karet. There is no prohibition of being cut off at this time from your people, and therefore, during the 6-hour period, Chazal, when we say Chazal, we mean our rabbis, our teachers, gave a ruling that was not so strict about no tein tam lifgam, about a bad taste being offered at that time. Now, if I haven't confused you yet with all these different opinions, we're going to just summarize. So, in Pesachim, it says even a little bit is prohibited. Rashi says it's prohibited, Hameets is prohibited because of the thought of being karet, you'll be cut off. Rambam says that a mixture would be permitted if batul vashishim, if it was less than 1/60th. The Shulchan Aruch disagrees, but says 6 hours after sunrise, you have to stop eating chametz. And the Mishnah Berurah says that you won't be cut off, but he says, but if you really look, the Mishnah Berurah is agreeing with Rashi to a point. He's agreeing with Rashi. According to Rambam, it would be acceptable to eat it if you made it after the 6 hours, if you waited until after the Pesach was finished, after 8 days. So you happen to make it after your 6th hour, you did something that was chametzik, you can't derive benefit from it now. But he's saying that if you wait until Pesach is finished completely, then you could have it. Well, the Ramah. So who's the Ramah? We talked about the Ramah many times. The Ramah is Moshe Isserles, and he's also known as the Ramah. And the Ramah says, Moshe Isserles is the one, the Ashkenazi opinion, that comments on the Shulchan Aruch. He comments on Yosef Karo. And he says, well, we can be lenient when it comes to lach. What is lach? I didn't say loch, I didn't say a whole, lach. We talked about lach and yavesh last week. Solid foods and wet foods. Yavesh meaning dry foods, lach being wet. Okay, a sloppy soup with all kinds of things in it and it's all wet and juicy. He's saying you can be lenient if it comes to a wet mixture, a wet soupy mixture. But he says if we had a mixture, for example, of crackers and matzah, well, they're similar, aren't they? Isn't a cracker similar to, what the, what was his name, the Yiddish writer who wrote all the beautiful books? I'm trying to think of his name. He's from my grandfather's hometown, actually. I'll think of it in a minute. He called matzah hem-stitched cardboard. Hem-stitched cardboard. So if you take a cracker and you hold it next to a matzah and you eat the both of them, they're very similar. So we're going to call them similar things. So if you take a cracker and you mix it up with matzah in a bowl and you're sitting there, that would be a problem. Why? Because he says the chametz would wake you up. We'll talk about what that means. So if you cooked dairy in a meat pot, that hasn't been used in 24 hours, we said the food was kosher, but the pot would have to be kashrut, right? Well, in a way, there's a similarity here. The Ramaz says that we have to be strict on Pesach, and he says an example here. If you used your Hameets pot, think about this. You have a chametz stick of pot, you put it away, you accidentally take out that pot, and you cook your chicken soup in it by accident. You didn't do it on purpose. You're making a Pesach tikka chicken soup, and you took out your chametz stick of pot, and you made it in there by accident. The Mechaber, who's the Mechaber? Yosef Karo. He says, for example, if you did that, he says that the Mechaber says if it's Eno ben Yomo, meaning it's not been used in 24 hours, that it might be permitted. And the Ramah, Moshe Isserlis, takes a much more strict opinion and disagrees and says it's not permitted. Well, here's something new. Our Ashkenazi friend is being more strict than the Mechaber himself. He's being more strict than Yosef Karo. He implies that maybe if it hasn't been used in 24 hours, that it would be permitted. But he says maybe, he says, not everyone is strict. But our custom as Jews is to be very, very strict on Pesach. So there's a halacha, which we haven't spoken about, and it's called Zeh V'Zeh Gorim. In the Gemara, in the Masechet, in the book of Avodah Zarah, where it talks about idol worship, Avodah Zarah, it says, if I have a field that was fertilized with manure, and that cow is being worshipped by their people, and is therefore considered Avodah Zarah, or if the cow was fed with food with the prohibitions of Avodah Zarah, one opinion is that you can use the field and you can eat the animal too. And the other opinion is we do not eat the animal. You don't eat that animal because it was used for idol worship. So again, we have a machloket. We have a disagreement. And the disagreement is Zev v'Zeh Gorim. You can't benefit from the cow which got fat by eating the foods of Avodah Zarah. That cow was eating foods that was being used for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship. You're not allowed to eat that cow because it was eating food that would be violated. You know, I'm going to give a one-off class as well on, I wonder if any women will show up to the class. We'll have to see. Because look, I'm looking at the room here, and it's 99.5% women, right? It's interesting. I wanted to give a class, but I won't do it if you vote against it. I wanted to do it on wine and whiskey. Why? Because I wanted to, Shirley says don't bother. All right. The reason I'm saying I wanted to give the class is because that's one of the issues, is Avodah Zarah. You know, there's a conservative opinion that says you can drink any wine now. Why? Because they're not being made by the one guy in his cellar who's making wine who is idol worshiping. Because our fear was Avodah Zarah, that if he's an idol worshiper, you can't drink that wine. When you buy a wine by, I don't know, give me a non-kosher big winery in California. You're buying that wine, it's a whole corporation. First of all, who in that corporation is going to be an
Gallows.
Which one?
Gallo. Ernst and Julio Gallo is a non-kosher winery.
Excellent. Excellent, Joseph. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, Gallo wines. They're Italians. Mamish, even better. They're probably Italians. If you think of that, they're probably Catholic of all things. They're not even, so they believe in God. I think that your fear of idol worship is not, what Ava says, I don't see why gender should influence a decision on a wine whiskey session. What do you mean, gender? I'm trying to understand. Did I say something about gender?
Hi, Marshall. So by gender, I mean, you said a session, whether men or women.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason, okay, excellent.
But I don't understand why. I mean, we have a culture in this house of single malt whiskeys.
I'm coming over.
You just tell David. I'll tell David.
I'll tell David. So I love single malt whiskeys. And then I appreciate it because that's why I want to have the session mostly. I want to have it because of single malt whiskeys. There is a whole thing that just happened this past month with mixtures in a particular vodka. Everyone's heard of Grey Goose.
Yeah.
I've drunk it myself many times. I don't even like it. I like much simpler vodkas. Truth be told, I prefer potato vodkas, the ones from Russia and the Ukraine. And certain vodkas actually have an OU on it, on the back. Stolichnaya has a OU on the back, Orthodox Union certified. Luxasova, which is a potato vodka, has an OU on it. But most of them do not. And most of them are still considered by core to be kosher. And I find that what they discovered was the Hasidim discovered it. And there's a big hoo-ha right now in Borough Park. Don't ask, because they would be having it on their tables. Grey Goose. Why would they want to pay $50 a bottle when they can buy vodka for $29? I have no idea. I don't think it's better. But nevertheless, it has a name. People like it. They were using grape alcohol to flavor their natural plain vodka. Grape alcohol to make the vodka. Well, you can't use grape alcohol because grape is forbidden according to the Masechet we were talking to in Avodah Zarah and the Gemara and the Talmud. It says if it's grapes that are crushed by non-Jews, you can't drink it. The conservative opinion is that you can drink any wine that is from a big corporation because Avodah Zarah wouldn't exist. It's interesting because we're talking about mixtures here. With single malt scotches, there became a whole issue many years ago, and I want to bring it up, and I'll talk about my conversations with Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner of blessed memory when he was the head of CORE in Toronto, and about Scotch whiskies, about the idea of the concept of 1/60th or less of Batov Ashishin, even though it was intentional, of sherry casked scotches. Sherry meaning made from grapes, being mixed in with a scotch. And can we drink a sherry casked scotch? Not for this time, but for another session. Ava, you motivated me. You're right. Gender should have nothing to do with it at all. And I'm gonna, I guess I'm gonna do that one. Anyway,
I'd like it.
Thank you, and I like it too because it's very interesting. Because I'll show you why I believe why you can drink many of the scotches that are now being approved, even though a few years ago they said you could not. And I'll give some very interesting examples of that. But trying to get back onto track because I'm not so good at that. This idea of kashrut for Pesach came about because there was a cow on a field who was eating Avodah Zarah worshipped foods. I don't know. What were they worshiping? They were worshiping the hay. They're praying to the, I don't know, whatever it was. The people that were harvesting the hay maybe were idol worshippers. And because they're harvesting the hay and the cows are eating that food, it's considered idol worshipped foods. You can't eat the cow. Well, to me that seems very far-fetched. But we know from our rabbis, you can't benefit from the cow which got fat by eating the foods of Avodah Zarah But what do we puskin? What do we actually follow? What do we do? What do we follow? When we say puskin, we mean what did the rabbis rule? What's their ruling? You know, they always picture the gavel coming down at the table and one big rabbi with a beard comes down and smack goes bang, that's it. You know, I finished a course recently on Nida. Nida meaning the menstrual cycle and the laws that make separation Jewish law. Men and women have to be separated. And I took this for like 6 months. I was studying these laws. And as I'm studying them, and I wrote the final exam, and I didn't get the mark back yet, I'll let you know. But I can tell you that it was one of the hardest things to study for many reasons. Why? Because I was thinking about nobody's ever going to come to me to ask me a question on this, ever. And nor should they. And nor should they. There should be women experts for this topic, and there are Rabbanites now. And these Rabbanites are graduates who have the same form of a smicha as any man would have in the Orthodox world. Well, that's a first, and that's pretty recent in the last decade. We have women Orthodox rabbis. They don't have pulpits. They're not trying to be leaders of congregations. They don't even want to be. They're teachers and they're fantastic. But if I was a woman and I had a question about Nida, the last person I want to go to is my Hasidic male Rebbe. I want to go to a woman and ask about that. And the idea here is when we learn about something, of whether something is permitted or not permitted, and what do we follow and what do we puskin, we have to think, who's puskining on this? What right do rabbis have to puskin on some of these things? If we have two things, one is permitted and one of them is not permitted. Usually we puskin that it's permitted. They find the leniency, and I find that fascinating in a good way. So some of our later rabbis, the Achronim, have this idea, and I'll share it with you. If a cow eats Hameets, because remember we talked about the cow eating the Avodah Zarah food. A cow eats Hameets. Can we drink the milk? On Pesach. This is what the Achronim are bringing forward. On one hand, the milk is not chametz because the chametz is already digested. Remember we talked about davar chadash, a new thing? I said that my guitar beside me doesn't look like a tree. It looks like a guitar now, and it plays. It's a musical instrument. Your coffee table at home is not a tree. I don't even know. Some people say the coffee tables are still considered living things. I don't. But I think that we can assume there's no more roots. It's not growing from the ground. If it did, I'd have baby guitars all over the house here. I'd be happy. But the idea is that the milk that's coming, that is already created by the food that was digested, that was chametz, is what the scholars were talking about. Zev v'zeh gorim. And it was fed something that is not allowed. So along comes another scholar named the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram. The Magen Avraham is Avraham Gombiner. And Gombiner was born in Poland, and he was a posek, a leading religious authority in that community of Kalisz in Poland during the 17th century. And his full name is Avraham Abela ben Chaim Halevi, and from the town of Gombin. So he is known by other scholars for his Magen Avram commentary on the Orech Chaim. The Orech Chaim is a section of Rav Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch. Remember I talked about 6 books? One of the books is called the Orech Chaim. So whenever you hear the Orech Chaim is saying, it's not the Orech Chaim saying, it's Yosef Karo is saying it. you know, you hear at funerals, the rabbis get up and they say, in the such and such says, they refer to the book as the book says. Well, the book doesn't say, the author of the book says it. But we call authors by their books. So in this case, we're saying the Magen Avram, but the Magen Avram is referring to a book that's a commentary on the Orach Chaim. And so when we say the Magen Avraham, we can think of a commentator. We think of a human being, not just a book. We have to think of a person, and that's Avram Gombiner. And that's his most important work. And he comes forward and he says, well, he says there's a maybe here. Maybe we should be strict. And on this, the milk should not be allowed. Oi, what are we going to do now? But then comes along the Pri Megadim. We'll talk about the Pri Megadim next time. Too much to go into them right now. I have lots of notes to share. But he says, if you wait 24 hours after the cow ate the Hameets, you wait 24 hours after the cow ate the Hameets, it's okay. So what's the Pri Megadim doing? Pri Megadim is trying to find a leniency here. And that becomes a machloket between the Pri Megadim and the Magen Avram. Another big surprise, there's another disagreement here. And that's why a lot of people buy their milk before Pesach. Because if you buy it before Pesach, and by the way, it's the same with eggs. Some people buy their Pesach as well because maybe the chickens ate grains. Maybe the chickens ate grains and the grains are asur. Maybe you're that strict. And if you're that strict, then if you buy your milk before Pesach, you're allowed to drink it. Not if it's opened, but if it's sealed in a container and it hasn't been opened, you can have it. And some people follow that with orange juice as well. But the idea is that with eggs and milk like that, so it doesn't have the sticker on it. Is it really asur? Is it really forbidden? Okay. So now comes the Igrot Moshe. Who remembers the Igrot Moshe? We talked about him last time. Yes, you do, Leonard. Remember Moshe Feinstein, our favorite. Modern posek. Moshe Feinstein, he doesn't think in his tshuva that he wrote that it's a problem with milk at all, and this whole idea of zev v'zegorim. He doesn't think it's a problem at all. And he says there should not be an issue, and you should go ahead and buy milk. But what else does he say, Moshe Feinstein? He goes on and he says, basically in his usual way, it's okay, but in my holy neighborhood, I'll buy milk with a kosher Pesach symbol. You know what I mean? He'll go looking for the special milk. It's the same thing with the Chalav Yisroel. He would tell you that you can buy any milk from any institution, but he himself, did he buy that? Probably not. He probably bought Chalav Yisroel. So we have a couple of minutes left, and I just want to talk about for 5 minutes about something different other than food that I promised, and that is the idea of cosmetics that are being used on Pesach and things like that. You know, if you eat a cooked onion, what do you say? What kind of a bracha do you make? You say a bore pri ha'adama because it grows from the ground. If you eat a raw onion, I don't know who just picks up an onion and eats it like an apple. Well, it might be good. I don't know. I like onions. You actually don't. You say a shehakol. You don't say a bore pri ha'adama. You say shehakol. Because the standard practice is not to eat a raw onion. Isn't that interesting? So a lot of what we do comes from what is the standard practice. So Anna Bloom asked a question that was from before. Cows chew the cud. So at what time do you consider it eaten? Well, I guess after digestion. It would all have to do with digestion. So if you're saying a shakol because it's not normally eaten, what is our scholars teaching us here? when you put on lipstick, is your lipstick something that you go, yummy, this is delicious, I want to eat it, I'm going to take a bite out of it, I'm going to chew it and swallow it, I'm going to have another one. It was so good, I'm going to open another lipstick and I'm going to eat that because I'm hungry. You got a lipstick in the car and there's no Tim Hortons around and you're hungry. Do you open up the lipstick and eat it? Not really. You wait until you get home. You're not that hungry because it's something that isn't normally eaten. So if something isn't normally eaten, the bottom line is that they're saying you really can have it. But why? So the Shulchan Aruch says, bread, a piece of bread, you leave it out, you forgot about it, it becomes moldy. It's all moldy and full of green and blue and every color mold you can imagine. It's inedible by your dog. A dog would not even want to look at this moldy bread. Or another thing, you remember the old days when you had a wound, they made you a plaster? It was called a plaster. Like we didn't have Band-Aids, they made like a plaster. Esther's nodding her head. Esther, you're not that old to remember a plaster. You might have heard about it. My father used to say, you'll get a mustard plaster. I don't even know what it was. Maybe if you had a bad cold. Noreen's saying, yes, they made you a mustard plaster and they put it over your chest to help you bring out the cold. So I heard about it, but I never had one. By my time, we already had Vicks Vapor Rub, which is another thing. Talk about Vicks Vapor Rub. It wouldn't have a hechsher on it for Pesach. You got a cold. Can you use Vicks Vapor Rub? Because are you going to take a spoon and eat the Vicks Vapor Rub? No, you'd be mishigan. You'd be not normal to sit down and want to eat the Vicks Vapor Rub, the same as you would not be normal. And by the way, normal means kedarko. They sell it. Shalo kedarko, darko, the normal way of doing things. The normal way of doing things. The normal way of doing things is not to eat those things. So if Hameets was moldy before the mid of the day on Erev Pesach, and it became inedible to a dog, or if you took that piece of toast, I said it last week, I said, think about this. Remember I said last week I ended it off? I forgot what I asked, but I just remembered now. I said, you took a piece of toast, nobody gave me the answer, and you charred the daylights out of that toast. It was so black and so charred and so ruined that you would never eat it. If it's to that point, you can go ahead and eat it. That's what they're saying. That you can have. You want to eat a piece of charred toast that is so charred that it's unrecognizable, that it's like coal and it tastes lousy and it's no good. Why? It's a new thing. It's not bread anymore. It's moldy, it's charred, it's burnt, it's lousy. Who wants it? I'd rather have the matzah that's delicious out of the box. What do I need to eat that piece of? So if you're that crazy, like the Meshuggah Hound that one of the Rebbe's talked about, where they asked the Igros Moshe, I think it was the Igros Moshe, I think they asked Moshe Feinstein, they said, what about toothpaste? Do I need to buy a new toothpaste? So here's what Moshe Feinstein said. He said, the question of maybe my medicine, my aspirin or my Tylenol has Hameets in it. Since it's in order to heal, it is clear that you have to take this medicine, even if it is Hameets. In fact, if there's no danger, there's no concern at all, it is nullified in the name of food, is disqualified as being food before Pesach because it's been made into medicine. So what he's saying is if it contains starch, not potato, but actual starch, like something that is forbidden on Pesach, it's within that medicine. The halacha that we learned from the Rush, he says, is the rule does not apply for something that you are taking for medicine. Because people even take things for themselves that don't taste good as bitter as medicine. What is he saying? A normal adult is not going to say, I'm hungry in the car and all I've got is a bottle of Tylenol, so I'll eat 3 Tylenol to satisfy my stomach to feel better. You're not eating it as food. That's why you should keep some candy in your car. You're not going to eat a lipstick. You're not going to eat a burnt piece of toast. It's not normal. It's not to eat a Tylenol. And therefore, he says you have nothing to worry about. Take it as your doctor says. And he finishes off his letter by saying, God should grant it as a cure. So the Igrit Moshe, who talks about all of these things, in another one of his letters, he says, ointment. If, let's say, the ointment has alcohol in it, can they use it? He says, regarding rubbing or applying the ointment onto sores on the body where there is no danger from not using it and just some irritation. As far as benefiting from Hameets, since it's not food, they are allowed to benefit from it, and the ointment has to be made before Pesach. It becomes inedible just like any case of the Shulchan Aruch. The rule is only if the bread or plaster became spoiled before Pesach. Alcohol by itself, when it's visible, is not considered inedible. Okay. But if the alcohol was in cough medicine, and the cough medicine contains that alcohol, you don't have to worry about it, because the alcohol, it's not because of batul v'shishim. It's not because 1/60th. It's because you can't see it as being just alcohol. You're not saying, I'm going to distill this cough syrup to remove the alcohol from it so I can drink it. You know, if you were gluing something and the glue bottle had, I don't know, alcohol in it, you're not going to try and separate the alcohol from the glue in order so you can drink the glue from the alcohol from the glue. It's just not something that you're going to do. And because it's not normal, then you can go ahead and you can have it. But when it comes to toothpaste, it's preferable to buy a new toothpaste. But if you don't have a new toothpaste, or there's great sorech, a need, and you can't afford one, squeeze a little bit out and then continue to use it, the next part that comes out of the tube. He said, because, he says, Moshe Feinstein says, your dog, he's writing back to the person that wrote the letter, that ate this toothpaste, he says in the Yiddish in the letter, he says, is a Michiganer Hund. He says, because no normal dog would eat toothpaste. And he says, regarding lipsticks for women, he said, take a klipa. Remember we talked about klipa? We talked about how earlier on with a cucumber, if you used a meat knife to slice a piece of cucumber off, and now you're saying, I want to eat the cucumber for dairy. He said, just take a carved knife and cut a little slice off. Cut a little bit off your lipstick. Take a little tiny sliver off the lipstick, and then you can go ahead and you can use the rest of it for Pesach. So I just find it interesting because OU, the Orthodox Union, used to have a position that vitamins were not allowed to be taken during Pesach because they might contain starches. They have reversed many of those opinions now, and I find it interesting. They become much more lenient on this, and they're saying, take it. The vitamins are not being eaten to enjoy. Although you could say they are. I mean, some of the new ones I look at and see what they're making fancy vitamins that taste good, but normally, the normal thing is not to say, I'm hungry, so I'm going to have 31 and a half vitamins. It's not something you're eating to for the enjoyment of eating them. It's something you're taking for the reason of being healthy. So, regarding, by the way, it wasn't Moshe Feinstein that said about the Meshuggah Hun. Sorry, it was Rav Soloveitchik that answered somebody on the letter. I found the letter here, and I'm not the actual letter, but a copy of it. And it was Rav Soloveitchik that said, you have a crazy dog and a Meshuggah Hun. And he said, typically toothpaste is not eaten by dogs, so by definition, it's not considered food. So there you go. Now, mouthwash. There's an interesting one for Pesach. So I guess you can live without it for Pesach. Do you have to have it? I don't know. Maybe you have to. Maybe it's your thing. I don't know. Some mouthwashes have alcohol in them. And those alcohols can be grain-based. The alcohol is made from wheat alcohol. It's not made from potato alcohol. So how can you have a mouthwash that is using alcohol that is grain-based? Why? Because it's only serving as a messenger. It's a carrier of the actual product. It has mouthwash, if you smell it, It's minty. It's mint. It's like smelling, I don't know, it's minty, right? It carries a fragrance. So traditionally in Kashrut booklets, there are lists of perfumes which were okay to use on Pesach, but really what Moshe Feinstein is saying, he says, this is exactly what he says. He gives two reasons regarding alcohol-based products. He says this: if an alcoholic would drink it, for example, perfume, for the alcohol, or perhaps he's in prison and there's no alcohol, the simple understanding, however, is just because an alcoholic or somebody in prison would drink it doesn't mean that it's not permitted. Rav Moshe Feinstein says one could theoretically distill the alcohol. You could distill it, you could separate it. But he says, we don't worry about this. Now, we've talked a lot about the Igrot Moshe. If Moshe Feinstein wants to tell you that you can't do something, he just says it's forbidden, you can't do it. But here he's saying, the understanding is that it doesn't mean that it's not permitted. Wow. So you come to me and you ask me, Marshall, can I have this? And I say, well, the laws don't mean that it's not permitted. Well, the laws don't mean that the wine that you buy that isn't kosher is not permitted. But I'm not telling you to buy not kosher wine. I'm suggesting there's so many good wines out there that are kosher today. It's not like when I was a kid and we went to the LCBO, you couldn't even see the bottle. You gave them a check, they took the paper, they went back, they brought you a bottle of Carmel sweet wine or Manischewitz or whatever, David. And that was, you had a choice of 3 sweet wines, and that was it. And today we have so many wines kosher from Chile and from Spain and from Portugal and from Israel and from South Africa and from Australia and Canada, that we don't have to, there's so many choices and varieties. But you're at a hotel and you're in North Bay and you want to have a glass of wine and there's no kosher wine. You're not using the wine to say Kiddush. You can't use it for Kiddush. Could you drink it? Would a frum person drink it? Probably not. Our movement says you can drink it. So I would give you the same answer that Moshe Feinstein would say. It's not, theoretically, it's not from Avodah Zarah, and you don't have to worry about that reason. So he might say, I'm not saying it's not permitted, but would he drink it? Absolutely not. And the same thing goes here. Would Moshe Feinstein himself take that mouthwash that may have a grain base in it and drink it? He's saying for the world out there, if you want to use it, you don't have to worry about it, you can use it. But I guess you have to ask yourself the question, because now you're becoming your own rabbi. You have to make common sense for yourself out of it and say, do I want it? Do I need it? He's not saying it's not permitted, so I can have it, or I can live without it for the week. It's kind of like the microwave idea. Can you really kosher a microwave for Pesach? Some say yes, some say no. So they're not saying it's not permitted, and you have to decide for yourself, what does my community do? Does my community use it? Would my community care? Do I care? Does it matter to me? Because there's a leniency. In recent years, the alcohol that is used is not grain-based alcohol, and these products using alcohol use other starches. And it's not common to use wheat anymore, from what I understand, and the chances of the alcohol that is grain-based is slim. Why? Because it's more expensive. And they try to always cut down costs on those products. It's also not edible. And for those reasons, they no longer list perfume on the OU list as a concern. They took it off. They took perfume off the list. They used to say you can't use those perfumes that are alcohol-based or colognes on Pesach. And now the OU says you're not drinking it. You're not separating the alcohol from it. And they're not even using alcohol that is grain-based. So go ahead and use your perfume if you want to use it on Pesach, or your cologne. And I find that interesting because all of those products, shampoos, deodorants, creams, it creates a whole new discussion of things and products that we used to think we have to be careful about on Pesach, but now OU is saying you don't need to be concerned about it. So I'm going to tie it up there. I want to stop talking, but what I want to say is that thanks to Ava's encouragement, I will do that talk on alcohol because it is fascinating about the mixtures and the products and what they do to the alcohols and which ones are kosher and which ones are not and which ones do our rabbis say, well, it's not that it's not permitted. I love that answer. It's not that it's not permitted. If you tell me in alcohol, it's not that it's not permitted, I'm buying it. But you may not. So keep your watch out for halacha on wines and alcoholic beverages. We'll do one on that. I think one is probably enough. We'll see, unless you want to share. Yeah, one is enough. Ava says one's enough. And then after that, we'll continue and we'll do a 6 course program for those of you interested. And you don't have to come to every one. I'm not pressuring you because what I'm going to do is on technology, I'm going to pick different topics. So if it interests you, you'll come. And if it doesn't interest you, you can skip it. You don't have to come. Or you can come to all of them. Maybe I should give you a midterm and a final exam, and then you'll come to all of them. I should do that. I should make an exam up, a short 6 question, and post it afterwards. Maybe I'll do that. All right. I'll let you go. And starting Wednesdays, you're allowed to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. And bye, Shirley, and thank you for coming today, and to everyone, and to Karen, and Doreen, and Ava, and Estelle, and Dorothy, and Joseph, and Sorrel, and Esther, and Leonard, and Celia, and Ruth, and Rose. Rose, good to see you. And everyone, let's meet again when we start up again. So if I may wish you a happy secular New Year's, a healthy year, and to Dorothy, too. Hi, Dorothy. You made it at the end, I see. It's wonderful. And let's all stay healthy. There's good news today, I know, because I saw my RRSPs went back up. They went like this. They tanked 3 days ago, and they went back up today. Why? I found out because South Africa, their numbers are coming down. They peaked, and they're coming down. What does that mean? It means that it's a fast and furious virus, and it's a fast and furious leaving virus. And we will be safe in a number of weeks again. It'll go down, and we're going to hope that it stays that way and doesn't develop into something worse. God forbid. Okay, everybody be well. And we'll meet soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you, Marshall.
Great.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Bye. Thank you, Marshall.